They didn't think I'd say anything. They were wrong. I was standing in the back of the boardroom, arms crossed, jaw clenched, watching 6 months of my work being butchered by people who barely understood how the system functioned. This was a Meridian contract, a $6.2 million logistics overhaul for one of the biggest warehousing networks in the region. My system, my work. But you wouldn't know that from the presentation. Stephen Walsh, my boss, was soaking the praise like a sponge, nodding thoughtfully, making hand gestures like he understood what predictive freight optimization even meant. I watched him smile like he'd written every line of code himself. I wanted to walk up and rip the slides off the screen. My name is Alex Carter. I'm 41. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And until that moment, I was the lead systems analyst at Vanguard Solutions, at least in title. In practice, I become the person who did all the heavy lifting while Stephen made sure his calendar was clear for golf outings and networking brunches. Nobody wanted the Meridian job when it first came down. Too technical, too messy, too likely to blow up in someone's face. So Stephen tossed it at me during a Wednesday meeting like it was trash. "Carter, this feels like your kind of thing," he said, flipping the folder across the table without making eye contact. That was back in February. By April, I was working 14-hour days. By May, I'd lost my partner. By June, I'd been coughing blood and ended up in urgent care with bronchitis. But I kept going. I built that logistics platform from scratch, integrated with Meridian's outdated API, identified every bottleneck in their warehouse dispatching, and rewrote the core allocation logic so their trucks wouldn't sit idle for hours every night. I didn't just do the job. I cracked it wide open and rebuilt it better than anyone thought possible. And now, 6 months later, I stood in the back of this overpriced glass box while Stephen took credit for all of it. The presentation was riddled with buzzwords, slides cluttered with animations no client actually wanted. And when Stephen started walking through the system capabilities, I could barely keep myself from laughing. He didn't even know what half of them meant. Then David from sales chimed in, his voice all confident and rehearsed, explaining how the system would dynamically respond to weather patterns. That was my code, my late-night idea for March, scribbled onto a whiteboard while I coughed my lungs out and ate vending machine crackers for dinner. He called it teamwork, said we collectively brainstormed the logic. Michelle from marketing was up next, talking about frontline implementation strategy. I don't even know if she'd seen the actual platform before today, but there she was, confidently describing how Vanguard would handle the rollout. My name wasn't on a single slide, not one, and still I waited, I watched, I kept my mouth shut, until the Meridian CIO asked about our failure tolerance model. David stumbled. Stephen tried to dance around the question with a joke about industrial resilience. And then the COO, Diana Chun, leaned forward and asked, "What about rerouting under severe storm alerts? How does the logic prioritize when 2 distribution hubs are simultaneously impacted?" Silence. Stephen blinked. David glanced at his notes. Michelle looked at the floor. And from the back of the room, I said, loud enough for the mic to pick it up, "It uses NOAA's 5-day forecast API, cross-checked against historical delay averages and proximity redundancy scores. If there's a predicted storm within range, the system shifts priority to the next qualified hub with a 3-hour warning buffer." Everyone turned. Diana narrowed her eyes. "And you are—" Before I could speak, Stephen said, "Oh, that's Alex. He helped with some of the back end." Helped? I felt heat rise in my neck. That's when I stepped forward. I looked Diana Chin in the eye and said, "Actually, I built the entire back end, and the front-end logic, and the deployment structure. There wasn't a team. It was me, and I can walk you through every single line." Diana's lips curled into the faintest smile. She looked at Stephen, then back at me. "Good," she said. "Then let's go through it now. Live, right here." Stephen's face turned a shade I hadn't seen before. Something between beet red and panic gray. This wasn't how the meeting was supposed to go, but it was how mine would begin. I went into Stephen's office the next morning thinking I could still fix it. It started with little things. David from sales, who normally would know a JSON key from a coffee stirrer, started popping into my cubicle asking questions like, "Hey man, how does the weight distribution matrix recalculate when a late load comes in from Indiana?" Like he cared. Like he even knew what he was asking. Then Michelle from marketing pulled me into a conference room one afternoon to quickly review the rollout plan. The rollout plan she had nothing to do with. She sat there flipping through a binder of screenshots, talking like she wrote the entire playbook. I bit my tongue so hard I thought I'd chipped a molar. By the third week of this weird shift, I realized what was happening. Strategy meetings were being scheduled. Calendar invites flying around. None of them included me. These were Meridian prep sessions, executive briefings, slide deck reviews, and I was being boxed out. Then came the night I couldn't sleep. I logged in to check some load time benchmarks, but something caught my eye, a shared drive folder I hadn't noticed before. Meridian Final Presentation Deck. I opened it. 49 slides. I scrolled through slowly. At first, just scanning, half expecting the usual shallow graphs and buzzwords. But then I started seeing my work, my diagrams, my logic models, the custom KPIs I'd invented from scratch. Slide 14, Predictive Rerouting Engine, described in detail line for line. Slide 19, Workflow Automation Triggers. My triggers, my flowchart. Slide 26, System Cost Savings Estimate, lifted directly from a spreadsheet I'd built. Slide 33, Architecture Overview, including a rendering I'd made using Lucidchart at 2 a.m. one Saturday in March. And then I hit the team slide. There it was. Stephen Walsh, lead architect. David Stanton, solution presenter, core functions. Michelle Park, implementation strategy. Me? Nowhere. Not even a mention. No technical advisor. No platform lead. Not even special thanks. I just stared at the screen. My mouse hand froze. Something behind my eyes tightened. The kind of slow-burning ache that doesn't come from stress, but from something deeper. Betrayal. Humiliation. Rage. I shut the laptop, but I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I walked into the office with a fresh shirt, a coffee I didn't touch, and a plan to fix this before it went any further. Stephen's door was open. He was typing with one hand, cradling his phone with the other, grinning like he'd just landed a book deal. I knocked once. He looked up. "Alex," he said, all warmth and fake casual tone. "Got a minute?" I asked. "I do," I said. "We need to talk." He gestured to the chair across from him and leaned back like he was doing me a favor. I didn't waste time. I saw the deck. He paused just a hair too long. "What deck?" "The Meridian one." "Oh, right. That." He made a show of adjusting his keyboard. "Yeah, marketing pulled that together from everyone's inputs." "No," I said firmly. "It's my work. All of it. Every performance gain, every integration model, every predictive tool. That's me." Stephen nodded slowly, like he was waiting for me to finish a tantrum. "Listen," he said, "you've done great work, Alex. Really solid stuff. But you know how this game works." I just stared at him. He sighed. "Look, you're not client-facing. You're back-end. You're a systems guy. Technical, sharp, but not polished." "Polished." I repeated. "Yeah, you're not really the type we put in front of executives. You get flustered. You talk in code. You don't read the room." "So you're saying I'm too smart for the room?" He smirked like he thought I was joking. "No, I'm saying you're not built for the spotlight. And that's fine. Every orchestra needs someone in the pit, right?" I clenched my hands together in my lap, so I wouldn't slam them into the table. "You listed yourself as lead architect." I said, voice low, because that's what execs expect. They want to see leadership, continuity, a title they recognize. "Come on, Alex. You know how this works." I sat there for a second, feeling something settle in my chest. Not anger, not anymore. Just clarity. He leaned in. "You keep doing what you do best. Code, solve problems. Leave the stage work to us." I stood up. No nod. No handshake. As I walked out, Stephen called after me. We're all on the same team, Alex. I didn't turn around, because in that moment, I knew we weren't. The Meridian presentation was set for the following Tuesday, and I hadn't slept since Saturday. Not because I was prepping. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even looped in on the rehearsal. I found out the date from a Slack thread Michelle posted in the wrong channel. By then, I'd stopped trying to talk to Stephen. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I'd built. I just showed up. I wore a clean button-down, no tie, and sat in the back of the glass conference room like a ghost in my own story. The Meridian team filed in slowly. 3 executives, 2 senior tech leads, 1 woman in a navy pantsuit who moved like she owned the building. That was Diana Chun, COO. Stephen greeted her like they were best friends. Too much smiling, too much shoulder tapping. He introduced David as the solutions lead and Michelle as implementation strategy. I wasn't introduced at all. The presentation started. David kicked things off, his tone breezy, like he was giving a TED Talk on freight logistics. He said things like, "We create a proprietary decision matrix, and our platform uses AI-adjacent tools to streamline output." None of it made sense. Michelle went next, talking about cross-departmental onboarding and change readiness protocols. I sat there grinding my molars, counting how many of my diagrams were still in the deck. 9, maybe 10. Stephen nodded and smiled like a man running for office. He said, "Let's talk to the technical layer now," and motioned to David, who looked down at his tablet like he'd forgotten what planet we were on. That's when it happened. Diana leaned forward, fingers laced together. "Can you walk us through the weather-based rerouting logic?" she asked, her voice calm but razor-edged. David froze. He blinked once. "Sure. So the rerouting is, it's built on conditions, like system alerts." "Conditions from where?" Diana asked. "What data source are you using?" Stephen jumped in, laughing like they were all old friends. "We aggregate from multiple APIs. It's all pretty seamless." Diana didn't smile. "Which APIs? And how are you accounting for regional microclimate disruptions?" Silence. Michelle looked at her notes, but her page was blank. David cleared his throat and started to say something about Google Maps before he just stopped. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Nobody was going to answer, not correctly. And this was the one thing I knew better than anything. It was my logic. I'd built it, tested it, broken it, and built it again. So I spoke. From the back of the room, I said clearly, "We pull from NOAA's 5-day forecast API, cross-reference that against Meridian's historical delay logs, and apply a rerouting score based on proximity coverage and storm probability. The system reprioritizes regional hubs with a 3-hour buffer when the storm zone prediction crosses a certain threshold." Everyone turned. Stephen's face drained. He looked like he'd swallowed a box of nails. Diana's eyes found mine. "And you are..." Before I could answer, Stephen beat me to it. "Oh, that's Alex," he said, waving a hand like I was the IT guy from down the hall. He helped with some of the back-end stuff. Helped. The word landed in the room like a bad smell. I took a slow step forward and let the silence settle. Then I looked at Diana and said, "I built the back end and the front end and the data logic. There wasn't a team. Just me." Diana didn't blink. "I see," she said. She looked at Stephen, then back at me. "Would you mind walking us through the system end to end? Right now?" It wasn't a request. It was a test. I nodded once. "Of course." Stephen didn't say a word. He just stepped back like the stage had been pulled out from under him. I walked to the screen, opened the admin dashboard from my laptop, and pulled up the live demo. And then, in front of the Meridian executives and the entire Vanguard presentation team, I told the truth, every line of it. That night, I drafted my terms. I kept it short, led architect credit on all documents, lead on implementation team, 18% raise final sign-off power on all tech deliverables. I stared at the list for a long time. It wasn't even that much, not compared to what I'd already given. Then I attached the list to an email, typed Stephen into the address field, and hit send. No emotion, no apology, just a subject line that read, Signature Contingency. I turned off my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Leverage. Stephen called me into his office around 10:30 the next morning. I'd barely sipped my coffee. He didn't wait for me to sit. He slammed the door shut behind me and launched right in. Do you have any idea what kind of position you just put this company in? I stood there, arms crossed, not rising to the bait. You mean telling the client the truth? His face turned red, but he kept his voice low, probably because someone in HR had warned him about glass walls and office gossip. You completely undercut me in front of Meridian. You hijacked that meeting. I raised an eyebrow. I answered a question you couldn't. That wasn't your place. It wasn't yours either. You didn't build it. He scoffed, pacing. This isn't about who wrote the damn code. It's about trust, about optics. You made us look disorganized. You made us look like liars. He pointed a finger at me. You think you're the only one who's ever built something? I've been doing this 20 years. And in 20 years, you still can't answer a question about the platform you supposedly architected. That stung him. I could tell. You're not a team player, he muttered. You never were. I reached into my folder and handed him a single printed page. My terms. He looked down, reading quickly. Lead architect credit. Lead on implementation. 18% raise. He looked up at me like I'd just confessed a murder. You think you're in a position to demand this? Yes, I said calmly. I am. He laughed, dry and humorless. This is extortion. No, I said, it's leverage. He threw the page on his desk and leaned forward. You think Meridian cares about some back-end analysts? You think they'll tank a deal over a title? I think Diana, Chin gave me her direct number for a reason, I said, and I think she made it very clear who's signing off on the specs. You threatening to kill the deal? No, I said, I'm giving you a path to keep it alive. Stephen's jaw clenched. His eyes darted, calculating, probably realizing that without my signature, that $6.2 million was about to float off into someone else's pipeline. You're a damn risk, he muttered. No, Stephen, I said, I'm the reason you still have a project. He stared at me like he wanted to throw something, but all he managed was a bitter smile. You're replaceable, he said quietly. I smiled back. So are you. Let's see who gets replaced first. And with that, I turned and walked out. 3 hours later, HR called. Vanessa from corporate. Her voice was all soft tones and calculated diplomacy. Alex, we'd like to propose a compromise. I listened. Small print credit. 6% one-time bonus. Assistant lead title. Let me stop you there. I said, no. Silence on the line. You sure? She asked finally. Very, I said. You got till 5. And I hung up. The clock had officially started ticking. At 4:52 p.m., Vanessa appeared again. No knock, no Slack message, just her voice over the cubicle wall. Alex. I turned around. She stepped closer, folder in hand. Her expression was tight, almost unreadable, but her eyes gave it away. We'll give you the title, she said. You'll lead the implementation team. I didn't say anything. The raise is 15%. Not 18, but better than what was offered before. Still quiet. And the credit lead architect. It'll appear on all official documentation going forward. I nodded. Deal. She handed me the updated contract. I signed it without hesitation. And when I handed it back, something inside me clicked into place. Not relief exactly. Not victory either. Just solidity. Like my spine had finally finished welding itself together. I'd packed up my bag for the night, walked out of that office, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. The day the Meridian system went live, I didn't sleep the night before. Not out of anxiety. That part was long gone. It was focus. By 9 a.m., it was online. By 9:04, it was routing its first live package with 2 reroute buffers already triggered due to a storm front moving through northern Illinois. Flawless. By noon, Meridian's VP of Operations sent out a company-wide message. Live with Vanguard's platform. already seeing returns. Huge credit to Alex Carter and team. Incredible work. And then came the cherry on top. At the official launch event later that week, Diana stood in front of the room, smiled, and called me to the front. Not Stephen, not David, not Michelle, me. She handed me a framed letter printed on Meridian letterhead, signed by her and the CEO. It praised the platform, sure, but it spent 3 paragraphs naming me specifically. My leadership, my innovation, my contribution. People clapped. Stephen barely moved. He sat in the back corner of the room like he'd been nailed there. His smile was frozen, his eyes dead. I shook Diana's hand and smiled politely for the cameras. But inside, I was already gone. The next morning, I walked into the office early, 7:30, before the buzz of laptops and coffee mugs. I printed my resignation, signed it, folded it neatly, and walked it straight to HR. No speech, no dramatic goodbye, just paperwork. By noon, I was gone. At Meridian, I started the following Monday. My ID badge was waiting. So was my laptop. So was a corner office overlooking the city and a welcome kit with my name embroidered on the bag. 12 open head count. I used 4 of them in the first 30 days. Samir, Colin, Karen from QA, Luis from back-end dev, all from Vanguard, all brilliant, all previously ignored, boxed out, or taken for granted. I made the calls. No sales pitch. No ego. Just facts. You know what I'm building. You've seen how I work. If you want in, let's do it. They all said yes. And then more started reaching out. Some quiet, some desperate. People who'd watched me take the heat for a year while they smiled and kept their heads down. Now they wanted out too. It wasn't just revenge. It was revelation. They'd seen the shift. They'd seen someone stand up to the machine and not get crushed. And they realized they didn't have a stay in it either. The exodus had begun. It took less than a year. The department Stephen once strutted through like a general collapsed quietly at first. Missed deliverables, buggy handoffs, client follow-ups going unanswered. Then it hit loud. Vanguard lost a Thermodyne contract. A big one, 7 figures, went to a competitor. That competitor was using the platform I built. Not a clone, not a knockoff, the actual system. Meridian had licensed the stripped-down framework to their supply chain partners, and Thermodyne jumped ship for it. Stephen's name wasn't on a single line of the deal. That same quarter, 3 more people left his team. By the end of Q3, HR at Vanguard restructured Stephen into an advisory role. No announcement, no cake, just a sudden change in the org chart. His LinkedIn went dark for a while, then posted a generic update. Excited to focus on strategic initiatives and mentorship. Yeah, right. Meanwhile, I was invited to speak at a logistics innovation summit in Denver. Keynote slot. I stood on stage in front of 400 people, walking them through how we use weather-based triggers to predict reroute needs 6 hours in advance. A breakthrough that cut shipping costs by almost 30% in some regions. The crowd was silent, focused. When I stepped off stage, there was a line of people waiting to talk. Young engineers, startup founders, consultants, and in the back row, near the exit door, was Stephen. Older, smaller. He didn't try to wave or say anything, just nodded stiffly. I nodded back. That was all. 2 years in, my team had grown to 30 plus. We made up 19% of Meridian's entire logistics division. I never meant to build an empire. I just wanted a seat at the table. Now I had my own floor, my own team, my own budget, and more importantly, my name on everything I touched, not tucked in the margins or buried in the appendix. Right there, front and center. Led Alex Carter. At Meridian, people didn't treat code like magic. They treated the people who wrote it like professionals. And the system we'd built was now powering nearly a fifth of the entire company's logistics flow. Samir ran platform stability now. Colin headed systems diagnostics. Karen, who once got sidelined doing copy edits on feature docs, had built a new dashboard UI that had execs across 3 departments calling it the best damn tool we've ever seen. And me? I was finally doing what I was built for, not just coding, but leading, guiding, teaching, making space for people like me to not just survive the corporate game, but win it on their own terms. It wasn't about revenge anymore. That phase had passed. This was something different. This was legacy. I'd been invited to speak at a university tech panel, first as a guest, now as a recurring name. Young engineers approached me like I was someone worth listening to, and I never forgot where I came from. When they asked me how to handle being ignored, being erased, being used, I didn't tell them to rage. I didn't tell them to run. I told them to do what I did, document everything, speak clearly, and when the moment comes, do not flinch. Most importantly, I told them the truth that took me too long to learn. You are not the problem. You are the product. And when the product builds itself, it deserves more than a footnote. I keep Diana's original business card. It sits in my desk drawer next to the framed letter from the Meridian launch. Not because I need a reminder of what happened. I remember it all. I keep it to remember the moment everything changed. The moment I realized I didn't have to ask for a seat anymore. I could build the damn table. And now I don't ask. I hire. I don't wait for credit. I give it freely. I don't let good people get buried. Not on my watch. That's the legacy. That's the system I'm building now. Better code, better leadership, better lives. For every Alex out there still working in the back of the room, your moment's coming. And when it does, speak up.